This is Jerry Mason, the Kickin Lawyer, and I'm inviting everyone to join us every Tuesday at 5 p.m. on the Kickin Lawyer fan page on Facebook for Law Talk Live, where we discuss business, politics, current events, and the law. If you miss the live version, you can watch the playback on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast platform. All right, it's Jerry Mason, the Kickin Lawyer, and I have been under the weather, so I'm going to have this nice, sultry voice, I guess, today. As always, I want to welcome you to another Law Talk, and don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to us on all platforms, on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Instagram, TikTok, all those kind of things. You can check us out. We'd appreciate it. Also, if you haven't already, download Inside My Head. It's free. It's by the local band, N.A. The Band, and it's available wherever you listen to music, Spotify, iTunes, etc. We want to thank Michelle Allen. She's a longtime sponsor of the show. If you're buying, selling, renting, leasing real estate in Tennessee, she'd be glad to help you out. Just check her out. She's the local Cry-Like realtor. And if you want to learn how to kick people in the face, just visit masonsmartialarts.com. We opened a second location in Millington, and that business is the one I've had the longest. It's been open since '93. So you guys, please come check us out. The Cellar Restaurant Prohibition Bar opens daily at 4 p.m. Saturday and Sundays we have brunch starting at 10. We'd love to have you come check us out. We have live music Friday, Saturdays, Tuesdays, trivia, and we're opening a second location in Summerville, hopefully October. So check us out at cellartn.com. And then last but not least, Josh is glad to help you with your online social media presence, emails, website design, commercials. Just visit masonitemarketing.com. And joining me today is the golden boy, Greg Anthony, right?
Absolutely.
And I got it right.
You got it right.
And you got the big belt there. So tell me about the belt.
The belt is the AIWF World Heavyweight title. The AIWF is kind of like an NWA style territory system.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually 98 promotions across 36 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And I won the title in June in Dyersburg, Tennessee.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So here I am, world heavyweight champion, the golden boy Greg Anthony.
Congratulations. Where are you from originally?
So I was born in Centralia, Illinois, which most people will know as the place that bottles Country Bob's barbecue sauce.
Okay, I wouldn't have even known that.
So I was born there, and we lived in Salem, Illinois, till I was about 5,
Mm-hmm.
and then my family moved down here to Tennessee when I was about 6.
Was there a reason they came down this way?
The World Color Press. Do you remember World Color Press?
Okay. Our dad, so Josh is my brother.
Okay.
Our dad, Jerry Mason, worked at World Color, Quebecor, World Color, when it opened to when it closed. He was literally there the whole time in maintenance.
Okay, so in Covington or in
Covington.
He probably knows some of my family then, because I had plenty of family members that.
I'm sure he would have.
Yeah,
he passed away this year, earlier this year.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he worked there literally from when the place opened to when it shut down. Several years ago. So small world then.
Yeah, my grandfather, he worked in the one in Illinois and was laid off. Then my mom ended up working here until it closed. She worked there like 18 years until it closed.
Oh, they would definitely know. What did she do?
Well, she was the one in Dyersburg.
Oh, okay. Well, they might have still had.
She was in paper control. Basically, she made sure that they had the right paper for the right printing. That kind of stuff.
I don't know that I knew they had one in Dyersburg.
Oh yeah.
So there was a World Color Press in Dyersburg, just like here in Covington, both printing presses.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what happened when they eventually became Quebecor, which I think was a Canadian company. Yeah. So that's interesting. I didn't even realize there was one there. Well, anyway, my dad did it. He was maintenance, so he wasn't a press man or anything, but he was in maintenance forever.
Yeah, she might have known. She dealt with a lot of people, so.
So how did you get into wrestling?
So I've been a fan my entire life. I tell people all the time, my earliest memory of life is of professional wrestling. It's not of a birthday cake or a new bike. It's sitting on my grandmother's knee watching professional wrestling. We, like I said, we were in Southern Illinois. So in Southern Illinois, we got WWF, Crockett, WCW, NWA kind of thing, and we got World Class. So those were the three things that I really kind of grew up on. And then we moved down here to Tennessee, and one Saturday morning, I'm going through the channels, and sure enough, what do I see? I see Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was like, it was in Illinois, there's wrestling promotions, independent wrestling promotions, but they're not as prevalent as they are here. In West Tennessee, you can't throw a rock without hitting a weekly wrestling promotion. You know what I mean? So it's just it's very, it tells a lot to my story that I ended up here.
Yeah. So who was your go-to? Like, who was your favorite wrestler?
So when I was a kid, of course, I loved all the good guys and hated all the bad guys. So when I was a kid, it was like, Sting and the Ultimate Warrior and Dusty Rhodes and stuff like that. But guys that I always kind of gravitated to and I didn't realize were guys like Beautiful Bobby Eaton, who I ended up – he and I were tag partners for 2 years.
Oh, cool.
But he was actually one of my heroes growing up, you know what I mean? And Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson and Ric Flair and Ted DiBiase. And I was always very attracted to those seamless Southern heels, as we say. And like the way that they worked their matches and their style was kind of what always, drew me in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've had Jerry Lawler on before. I've had I think a couple of your buddies have been on before too.
Sure.
And I also have been a big professional wrestling fan. Like I grew up on it, and as a kid, Jerry Lawler, because of my name's Jerry, his name's Jerry, was always obvious. But then I always liked Hogan too.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you listen to a lot of folks from that late '70s, '80s era, how they feel about Hogan. Because it's usually either they're pro Hogan or anti Hogan.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody's kind of pro Ric Flair. But,
right.
Hogan was a polarizing guy, I guess.
Well, it's just, obviously with him helping dismantle the territory system, that's kind of one thing about it. But, of course, obviously, the style of wrestling. He was very lumbering and things like that. I always liked him myself just because, he was the top guy. Say your prayers and eat your vitamins, and that's what drew the money. So I understand that aspect of it. What I don't like about Hulk Hogan is just some of the outrageous lies he tells nowadays. Like he actually tells the story that he was actually offered to be the bassist in Metallica.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard that one.
You haven't heard that? Oh, there's Cornette on his podcast. You can go on him, and he basically they outline pretty much all of his big lies through the last 20 years, and it's hilarious. Just some of the stuff that he's
I think some people can tell lies long enough they don't think they're lies anymore.
Yeah.
It literally in their head becomes truth.
Yeah.
I listened to what is his name? What is the guy with the rat tail hair, Josh? Comedian. Theo Vaughn. That's it. Theo Vaughn. He lives in Nashville now. We need to try to get him on this podcast. Not that he would drive here for that, but I think he's hilarious. But he had, I think he interviewed Hogan too, and then he interviewed. Yeah, he did interview Hogan, and then he interviewed Ric Flair.
Right.
Like Flair before. The Flair one was awesome. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I
they were like hanging out, laughing, and apparently Ric Flair is still pretty crazy, still partying and wild.
Yeah, he had that scare where he almost died.
Yeah,
and he went straight for a little bit, and then he just went right back. Man, he's gonna run it until the wheels fall off.
Yeah. So I mentioned I have known of you in the circuits around here. I haven't actually gotten to see you wrestle. Obviously, you're good if you're holding the title. But what style of wrestling would you say you do?
I'm very old school. You know what I mean? Like I believe that professional wrestling, that 70s, 80s style, that's the peak for me. You know what I mean? I think everything has its peak, and I think professional wrestling kind of hit that peak there. You can talk about money, you can talk about television ratings, all that kind of stuff. But as far as being split between an entertainment and a sport and what they were producing in ring, I don't think there was anything better than that time period. So that's always what I try to emulate.
And see, again, going back to sort of that time, I'm curious because I do watch a lot, and I tend to watch like 70s, 80s old matches. I tell you what I enjoy about them, and I said this I think when we had Bam Bam on, was I like the marketing. There's a lot of salesmanship that goes into wrestling. And I'm not even talking about the actual performance in the ring. It's been able to hype a match and sell your character or whatever, the storyline. And so I think a lot of people can learn from, like, I love watching Ric Flair. Like the way he, builds it up. There's some that are just really good. Even like if you put, like when Hogan and Macho Man were together, and they played off each other as I can't remember what the name of it, something Maniacs or whatever it was. But anyway,
Mega Powers,
something like that, Hulkamaniacs or whatever he called them. They did really well playing off each other, and really building the match. So my point is, like, I really enjoy. My wife makes fun of me because they'll be laying there at night and I'm watching these oiled up grown men,
right.
arguing with each other. But I think there's lessons that you can take from it.
Absolutely.
So matches that stick out to you.
So I'd say there's two matches that you can credit and or blame for me to be in professional wrestling. And one is Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat, 2 out of 3 falls from New Orleans. Because I was, I think, 7 years old. And that was the first time I got through watching a match and I went, okay, I've got to be a wrestler now. Because I've got to do that. The second match was when I was older. I was probably 16, 17 years old. And, Mankind and Undertaker Hell in a Cell. And it wasn't because I wanted to get thrown off a 20-foot structure. It was just because I you saw how much Mick Foley loved professional wrestling to do that, right? And if I knew I was going to be in professional wrestling, then I'd had to love it as much as Mick Foley loved it.
Yeah.
You know, so those are the two matches that kind of always kind of stuck out to me.
Now, I know Dyersburg has a pretty big wrestling circuit, right?
Yeah, and that's what, Pro Wrestling Mid-South, the company that I'm a part of, we do events every Thursday night in Jackson. We do every Friday night in Ripley, and we do every Saturday night in Dyersburg. So Pro Wrestling Mid-South runs 3 weekly events, and to my knowledge, I don't think there's anyone else in professional wrestling that's doing that kind of stuff.
No. And do you guys, and this is a question because I was a promoter for mixed martial arts events.
Yeah.
And early on, when I started doing it, the first one was in like 03 or 04, and so MMA wasn't like it is now. Like
Right.
it wasn't like everybody did it.
Yeah.
And I was one of the only guys in the area that was actively doing it. And when I would go, I was fighting. And when I would go fight on a card in like Memphis or something, there would be these smokers, they called them. And it would be like you didn't know who you were fighting. It was very unprofessional. There'd be maybe a wrestling ring for us to be in that had some give where we needed to push off to kick, and it just wasn't stable.
Right.
Anyway, so I developed my own organization. It's called the High Octane Fighting Championship.
Yeah.
And so matter of fact, there's a glove from it, High Octane Fighting
wow.
Championship. Anyway, what I'm getting at is as a promoter, so I had a few things to figure out. So the cage thing was kind of new still, and I thought that I had to buy a ring or a cage. So I had a custom fabricated ring because I thought at the time if the MMA thing fell off, I could always rent it to boxing, wrestling, kickboxing.
Right.
So we got a ring. Here's the point I'm getting at. So we started doing shows, and doing shows like that's hard. Like when you do that many, there's a lot of setup. You got to have the card made. You got to keep it interesting. Well, at the time, we had very limited MMA fighters.
Yeah.
Very limited. Everybody was either a kickboxer or just a karate guy. They didn't do MMA. Right. So I had another system that I developed to sort of help try to build that up. I was teaching these karate schools how to create an MMA fighter. But the long and short of what I'm getting at is this. I was having trouble filling the cards. So on a couple of cards, what I did is have professional wrestlers. So one vividly that I remember is I managed to get a hold of Bill Dundee. And I had never dealt with professional wrestlers like that before. And I was, like you had mentioned, I watched him wrestle. So it was like a kid having an idol come in, And so he comes, we get in touch with his people. He comes down, and he was going to wrestle Brian Collins. Are you familiar with him? In the 80s, 90s, he was flying Brian Collins, and he was kind of a heel that they would have come in on the USWA down there. So Brian was kind of a local guy I knew, and they were going to wrestle. Anyway, I was the referee, and so I got to experience like them doing a match right there. It was very interesting. Very entertaining the way they did. And he even ended up incorporating me. I've told this before, but one of my other coaches of another MMA team, sort of to make fun of it, threw a chair in the ring. Well, Dundee's a professional.
Yeah.
And so he grabs the chair and acts like he's going to swing it at me. Well, I do a jump kick and knock it out of his hands. And when he realizes that I know how to do something and the crowd went all crazy, he's like, do it again. He starts playing with me on it.
Right.
It was very interesting and exciting to work with him like that. So I was just thinking about matches that I remember, and that's one. But, I've always thought that instead of it being – some people view MMA and kickboxing and stuff as a competitor to professional wrestling. But I think they can learn from each other. I think it's good things for both.
Absolutely. Our job as professional wrestlers is to make it as believable as possible, to have suspension of disbelief. So that's why, like I said, I'm more style of the old school kind of stuff. Nowadays, they go out there and they drop each other on their heads and stuff like that, and they get up 2 seconds later and act like nothing's wrong. As to where I want to sell everything. I want everything to look like it hurts. I want everything to be like that.
Well, the reality, though, and this is what I get frustrated with a lot of MMA guys. Like, MMA guys will train hard, whatever. They end up having one fight, maybe 3 fights a year, right? You guys are going multiple times a week, and those bumps are not fake. No. Like, you're taking legit hits, and you can look at even a lot of the current professional wrestlers that have all these ailments and disabilities because your body's just not designed to take that. Even when it's you learn to fall properly, there's still impact.
Yeah.
And so I've always had tons of respect for professional wrestlers. I think it's in the MMA community, I think is often underappreciated.
Yeah, I understand the MMA community is trying to distance themselves from us because they don't want to be phony, whatever adjective they want to use. But like you said, I run a training school too, and like 9 out of 10 people that come try don't come back after the first day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the bumps, like Tracy Smothers, who was a guy that was really good to me when I was young and became my friend and things like that, he always used to tell me, one bump is like being in a 25-mile-per-hour car wreck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And think how many bumps you take over your career. We have a thing called the bump card. You know what I mean? It's kind of a figment of our imagination, but it's kind of a real thing too. Like one day you're going to take your last bump. Your body just can't handle it anymore.
Yeah.
And you don't know when that day is coming. So everyone's got a bump card.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So on the training that you do, is that the one in Ripley? Where is where do you do training at?
Training we do in Dyersburg at the Herb Welch Wrestleplex in Dyersburg.
Okay.
So and you know, right now I have about 20 students. You know, they're all under the age of I think 25, most of them, and you know, they're just hungry and want to learn and stuff like that. And we bring guys up the right way. You know, we don't rush them into the ring. Some places, you know, they'll give someone 2 or 3 sessions and all of a sudden, okay, you're in a match Saturday. You know, that's not the way we do it at all. I want everybody to be safe and know what they're doing and be ready for when that time comes. So it takes me about 6 months to a year to get someone ring ready.
Well, so that's about the same as an MMA guy. It takes, in my opinion, you'll have some places they go and in a month or two they're fighting. But I think 6 months to a year for them to have a good basic grasp, at least to not get killed when they go in there.
Yeah.
It's similar.
And then even after the year passes, you know, they wrestle for us, and then I polish them out from there, you know. But it's a process.
So, what statistically you think? You know, you're going to have your front runners, your people that are crowd favorites, I guess. What do you think is like the secret science for that? Like, or is there one? Like, somebody just got the wow factor, or their persona comes over well, or what do you think's the key?
Well, it's just like anything else. It's a combination of both. You know what I mean? Like we talked about Hogan. Hogan wasn't a phenomenal wrestler. He wasn't Luthez.
Yeah.
But he was 6'5", and he had the blonde hair and the amazing tan.
Yeah.
Excuse me. He had the amazing tan, and then he had the yellow and the red like McDonald's, and you know, it was just, it all worked, right? So for me, it's always a little bit of both. So like a guy like Brock Lesnar, for instance, no one on earth looks like Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't you buy a ticket to see a genetic freak like that? You know what I mean? So, like, there's always stuff like that, but then he can back it up, too. And that's why I tell people, too, look, he's the most legitimate person we have in professional wrestling right now, and he just happens to be one of the top draws in professional wrestling. That's not... You know, that's not coincidence.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always, like I said, it's about believability. You know, are we presenting something that people can lose themselves in and have that suspension of disbelief?
Do you still have in the regional circuits where sometimes what do they call it? Because you'll have to help me with the terminology. But there's a work and then there's a shoot, and the shoot is the one where you're kind of fighting, right? Is that right?
Yeah, shoot is when someone tries to go into business for themselves.
Yeah. So does that still happen at all? Or?
Oh yeah, it's happened several times. But I mean, you try to minimize as much as possible. I mean, you're talking about grown men. It's a very ego-driven sport. There's a lot of testosterone involved, you know, that kind of thing. So people kind of get in their own heads sometimes. But, you know, I've been doing this 23 years. You know, I've had 4,000 matches, all the kind of stuff. So when that kind of stuff happens, we just try to calm it down. Hey, you know, this is not the way we do business, this kind of thing. You try to... there was one wrestler years ago. He was one of my guys that I booked everywhere I went. And he just, anytime something went wrong, he made it 10 times worse. I'm sure you've met guys like that in your life before.
Yeah.
But
I have some clients like that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so like I don't do business with him anymore because it was just like something would go wrong, and then he would just make it all that much worse and harder to fix. But in most cases, you know, most guys realize they're wrong, especially when it's coming from a veteran or someone that has a voice of reason that's gonna, you know, I'm not going to tell them something just for my own ego. It's, you know, this is really how the business works. You know, I'm trying to help you, and I think they realize that. So,
well, I had been interested in getting into professional wrestling because, you know, my whole caricature kind of fits along with it some, you know, because I'm a Kickin lawyer. And obviously I had actually talked to one of the last guests we had about going to one of his events, and I forget, there was a manager that he has there that's also a lawyer, and I want to say he's got a briefcase.
Lucky P. Larson.
That was it, and that may be doing something where, you know, that was like my nemesis somehow. So I've always been interested in it, and I always like the manager angle because to me, the managers, they have to sell their perspective without being as physical usually. You know, the wrestlers at least have the physicality element to use. And so, like, when I was a kid, downtown Bruno, you know, obviously
One of my best friends,
Paul.
actually.
Oh, really? Is he still around?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'd love to talk to him.
Downtown Bruno comes and does our events probably every 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I always thought
and
he
Lucky
was great.
P's going to be on our show Thursday if you want to swing by.
Really? I'll have to come see. Man, look, I swear I've been wanting to come see you guys. We were even going to, I got a man group. It sounds weird. A group of my friends
Right.
That are men. Anyway, that we'll go and do stuff just random. And I've several times put on the possibility of going and seeing some of the local wrestling. And the problem is I have like no time. Like,
Right.
I don't know if you know me or around here.
Yeah.
I have several businesses and I actually go to those businesses. So like I usually, when I eat, it's usually at my restaurant and I'm there working the restaurant. I have two martial arts schools. So I usually twice a week at least working at those. Yeah. And then it's like this runs right up against it. My point is, I'm not making excuses, but it's just difficult to take the time that would be for myself for fun, you know,
Yeah,
to go
I
check it
understand.
out. But I like knowing there's that many options. I didn't realize it was 3 nights a week you had as an option.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've wanted, you know, Kickin' Lawyer stuff. That's what I said too. You know, professional wrestling, the Kickin' Lawyer. That's a match made in heaven.
It's a good marriage, right?
I know. I've wanted you to be one of our sponsors. You
Yeah,
know?
well, I'm sure we can work something
Yeah.
out. Yeah, I put that logo on just about anything. So that's cool. Hey, tell me this. You kind of said it earlier, but you got a Japanese flag here. Is this organization go even through Japan and stuff?
Yeah, they have organizations in Japan and England and Australia and some countries that I can't even tell you right now.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be 36 countries. Canada, Mexico, obviously. That's actually on the other. Here's Canada over here on the side. Mexico's on that side, I think.
Cool.
But, like, you know, it's it's a pretty big deal. Like I said, you know, I was part of the NWA too, which was, you know, the National Wrestling Alliance. I was a 3-time NWA national heavyweight champion, and I always, you know, I had a couple shots at the world title, and, you know, politics and things like that just kind of never panned out. And now Billy Corrigan owns it, and it's not really where the NWA before was an alliance of promoters. It's more like a one-man garage band. Now he just kind of makes decisions, and it's like he has his little action figures that he's just playing with, you know.
Yeah.
So for me, I looked at the AIWF, and I looked at it like, yeah, there's 98 promotions across 36 countries.
Cool.
You know what I mean? I have an opportunity to be their world champion. So, and I've got the resume to prove it, so let's go for it. You know what I mean? So, like I said, I won it in June, and I've been rocking and rolling ever since.
So who else is involved in the promotion that people could see, wrestlers or promoter-wise?
So, just the title history itself, like Buddy Landell was a champion. I don't know if you remember him or not, but like Damian Wayne has been champion. Chris Michaels, former AWA tag champion. Can't remember his name right now, but I mean, there's just been a ton of people. You know, I mean, there's promotions, like I said. I think there's like 30 states that have this, you know, AIWF connection. There's not an actual promotion; it's just an alliance of promotions.
I got you.
So you're governing body.
More locally, specifically in your area here, who are some other wrestlers either under your tutelage or that they may get to see if they come to events?
Sure. The Real Foot Saint Brandon Ray. He's 24 years old. He's 300 pounds, and he is a baby bull. And he is currently the Pro Wrestling Mid-South Unified Heavyweight Champion. And he moves for a 300-pound guy. He can move, and he hits harder than just about anyone I've ever been hit by. So that's one guy. Another guy is Peyton Pee Wee Pitts, who is 175 pounds soaking wet, but he calls himself the superior athlete. And he is pound for pound one of the best guys out there because, you know, he calls everybody a loser and makes sure he puts, you know, the L on his forehead for it. We got a tag team called the Punishment Company, which is Thud Powell and David Jason Rose, and they're kind of like the Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard of the Mid-South. You know what I mean? They're very technically savvy. Thud, you know, is what a name, right? Thud, right?
Yeah.
How many people you ever know named Thud in your life?
Yeah.
But that's because that's what it sounds like when he hits them. You know what I mean? So there's the other guys, and then we got young talent like the Yellow Jacket and, you know, just a host of other guys.
Yeah. So for some reason that made me think of the question I meant to ask earlier on the promotion end. So when you do these different events, where do you do them? Because that was an issue I had on promotions. And do you move the same ring around, or do you have multiple rings? How do you set that up?
So I have multiple rings, right? So like Thursday night, we're in 2970 Old Medina Road in Jackson, which is I-40 take exit 83 down there. It's the old Jackson Tennis Club is what it is, right? So it's it's a tennis arena, right? But we stay set up there. So every Thursday night we just walk in and ready to go. Friday night, same thing. There's a building, 207 South Washington Street in Ripley, that has held wrestling for 15 years.
Yeah, it says Power Pro Arena, right?
Power Pro Arena, exactly. Yeah. And there was so many companies that came in and out of there, they just couldn't make it work. But we've been there for 7 years, so we've been there the longest, obviously, and done the best with it we can. So we're there every Friday night, and everything stays set up there. And then our home base really is where we started at, was in Dyersburg at the Herb Welch Wrestleplex, which is right across the street from the skating rink on 1827 St. John. And it's just an arena. We've got actually a Hall of Champions area in the front where we've inducted people into our Hall of Fame, Hall of Champions thing. And then the arena itself. So everything just stays set up. You know what I mean? And we do spot shows like you're talking about, where you just come in and set up and tear down and leave. We're going to be wrestling at the Tiptonville Arts and Crafts Fair, September 30th. We're going to be there at noon, outside, for all the fans to see. So that's going to be an interesting.
Yeah, I did a couple of outside shows with the MMA promotion.
Oh, yeah?
And that was always unique.
Oh, yeah.
Because the elements. We did one in Missouri that was it was in like a parking lot, really. And the guy had kind of gated it off, but it ended up getting so humid that between each round we had to go in and try to mop up the humidity. It was just so sweaty, and it was difficult to function.
Did you have like a vinyl canvas?
Yeah,
Those were always it's bad either way. But like we'd be in the middle of summer wrestling outside somewhere, and you take a bump, and it'd be 110 degrees on the mat.
Yeah.
Just you would sizzle when you bump,
you land.
and like you'd have to try to get up.
It's like flipping an egg.
Then of course when you're getting pinned, and the referee's trying to mess with you, he's like 1, 2, and you're like,
come on, dude.
Yeah,
that's funny. Yeah, so and then we had one where it rained on us, and anyway, the outside stuff's always interesting. Are you affiliated with the ones that do? Because I know several of the wrestlers sometimes can go around to different areas, but we saw some wrestlers set up at the in Metropolis, Illinois, at the Superman celebration.
No, but I think that's Casey Gold is who you're talking about.
Maybe.
Tennessee Championship Wrestling, maybe?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Me and him are friends. We have a working relationship, but we're not.
That's good. So as far as that on the promotion end, do you communicate with other promotions and say, hey, man, why don't you have your guy come try our guy, or vice versa? Do y'all do any of that anymore?
Well,
I know back in the day they did, back before WWF.
Yeah. So here's the issue. One of the main reasons that we started our own promotion was because West Tennessee had a huge problem with alcohol and drugs and pedophilia in professional wrestling. And it was one of those things that I would go tell people at Walmart that I was a professional wrestler, and they would kind of snarl their nose at me and be like, oh, you do that? Because it had that kind of reputation. And it always really bothered me that that's what it was, because I love professional wrestling as much as I do.
Yeah.
So our job was to clean up. So I've done a really good job as far as separating us from the rest.
I got you.
Like, these are our guys. We're a family-friendly, Christian-based company. We have a ministry attached to our company. So we're trying to do something different than these other people are trying to do. So we hold our wrestlers and their moral whatever to a higher standard. We don't put up with any of the stuff that some of the other companies put up with.
Yeah, well, I understand that. So I'm in a martial arts organization that's sort of a governing body for that end of what I do.
Yes.
It's called GTMA. And it's similar. We had separated from another organization previously, and there are other, like the thing, I'm sure professional wrestling is similar to this. A lot of people will go to, just say, some karate school or jiu-jitsu school, and there's a guy in there claiming that he's the instructor. But nobody knows to check if they are or aren't. They don't know how to look at credentials or what their background is. Are they legit? None of that kind of stuff. Most normal people don't. Once you're in the know, you can know. My point is, so yeah, I think that's good. It's important to have certain standards, and I understand sometimes having to separate from a pack because of that difference.
That's stigma. Yeah. I mean, it was just hurting business overall, and like I said, we're the only one before Pro Wrestling Mid-South. There was nobody that was pushing family-friendly professional wrestling. It was all cussing and drinking and flipping people off and cross chops and things like that. And don't get me wrong, when I was 18 years old and the Attitude Era was running wild, I loved that stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm 42 years old now. I'm a father. I'm a Christian. I just have a different set of beliefs now than I did 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So we try to adhere to that as much as possible.
I see. Well, if people want information on your programming or like how to get a hold of you or sponsorships, where do they go to look for all that?
So the easiest way, obviously, is Greg Anthony on Facebook, but also Pro Wrestling Mid-South on Facebook. we have our own Instagram and YouTubes and stuff like that. Everyone can check out. Main thing is, we also, Genesis 3224 is our ministry. We hold services every Sunday night at 6 at my building in Dyersburg. And that's, like I said, that's attached with us because, I had major heart surgery in 2017, and I'm only, like I said, I'm 42 now, so I was 35 at the time when all that happened, and it was just an eye-opening experience. So, it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I want to try to lead as many people to Christ as I can.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm 44, and I had a heart issue at 35 also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I didn't end up having to have surgery, but it did knock me down a little bit. And so I'm actually going to the cardiologist tomorrow.
Oh, I went today. I've got a heart monitor on right now.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I have to do that once a year so they make sure everything's okay. But basically, I was born with no right arteries, and no one knew. We had no idea, and I was wrestling 30-minute matches, and I started having these really intense chest pains. And at 35 years old, you don't think you have a heart issue. I'm thinking, it's blood pressure, it's this, it's that, it could be anything. So I would wrestle for a little bit, and then my chest would start hurting, and I would just kind of grab a hold and hold that for a little bit and let it ease off. And when it eased off, I'd start wrestling again. I did that for months.
Yeah.
And then I was on my way to a show one night, and my cardiologist, we had done a scan on my heart. And he called me and said, don't wrestle. He said, you have 2 70% blockages in your heart, and you have a 90% blockage in your widowmaker.
Man.
And I was wrestling 30 minutes, and I was a breath away from a heart attack. Yeah. No one could believe I was wrestling, number one. And then also being 35 and all the stuff we found out later. But, basically what happened was they went in and they gave me open heart surgery without giving me open heart surgery, is what they told me. Basically, they stented me. But they didn't crack me open because they saw how much I love professional wrestling, and they were afraid if they cracked me open and I was out of professional wrestling for a year, then I would be depressed, and there ain't no telling what would happen to my health from there on out. So they made a conscious effort to do the best they could. So they went in through my groin, went in and cleared angioplasted everything out, and then stented me, and then here I am.
Yeah, how long were you down from that?
I was down 4 months.
Dang, okay. So our dad had that years and years ago, and then they tried to do that again here recently. And then now I've had this new scare about a week ago. I couldn't get my breath. My heart rate wouldn't drop, and my left arm felt like it was numb, which is all these bad signs, right? Yeah. And so I went to the doctor, and they did an EKG. I think ultimately my problem is stress. That's what it was before. I didn't realize stress can manifest physically like that. I thought you had to have something wrong with you, but stress can do it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm hoping that I don't have any, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, well, maybe you could just stent it, and because I've just now I did the splits in a play, Rocky Horror show in October last year. I was Rocky, and so I was in gold Speedos, and I do the splits, and I tore my hamstring off the bone, and then after that surgery during the rehab, I tear my Achilles tendon on the same leg. And I've always been a big kicking guy. Like that's been my whole thing. Yeah. My whole deal is kicking. Yeah. And so, but I just in the last month got back into kicking again and training just some basic stuff. I'm not sparring or anything. And so I was like, told my wife, I was like, man, I hope nothing's wrong with me, because the same way, it's such a big part of my life. I don't want to not be able to do physical things. Yeah, it was a huge scare. Obviously, what you're going through too. We're way too young to be going through that stuff, Well, everybody's different, And the thing is like I have lived a good life. I feel blessed at this point. So every day I wake up, I literally woke up this morning and I'm like, okay, I got another day. So I got another day to hopefully do some stuff. When I do my daily prayer, I basically say, thank you, God, for yesterday, and thank you for today. Yeah, that's how I start my prayer. So I understand, because when all that kind of stuff happens, you're kind of in your own head, and like I went to bed a lot of nights not knowing if I would wake up the next day, and that's a horrible feeling to go with. It is a horrible feeling. However, because I'm Christian also, I think more people need to understand that tomorrow's not promised. Exactly. Today is a gift. Tomorrow's not promised, and so that's why you should. People ask me all the time locally the thing, because I kind of like you're really active. I do a lot of stuff locally. And they're like, why or how do you do all these things? And I do think literally that every day is a gift. Yep. And it's a gift from God. And why am I going to squander this gift? Why am I going to sit here on TikTok for an hour when I could be doing something else productive, spending time with family or whatever it is, talking to somebody cool, new to me, Right. So I wish more people would take that a little more to heart. Yeah, and that's, like I said, our main thing with the ministry.
I'm not the minister, by the way.
Yeah, me neither.
God's the in charge of the church, and I'm just a secretary, I guess. And then we have a pastor, and the pastor is actually. I went to school with a girl, and she works at Lusk Chiropractic in Dyersburg, and they're one of our sponsors. And I was going by there to get some of the sponsor money and stuff like that. And she started asking me about my testimony, and I told her how I've been thinking about starting my own ministry, and I have this name, and that kind of thing. And I said, I can't find a pastor. And she said, well, my husband has been, looking to pastor. We've done youth pastoring, but he wants to get into, actual pastoring. And we had a lunch together, and he ended up saying a lot of the same thing I said. It's amazing how God works like that. I tell people all the time, like, I don't really believe in coincidences anymore because there's been too many coincidences that ended up not being coincidences at all. You know what I mean? Like, God put that person in my life at that time, or put this opportunity in front of me for this reason, so.
Yeah, well, I definitely think it's arrogant for anyone to say they understand exactly why. I think that's possible for things like that happen because of divine, intervention. Have you seen the Oliver Anthony guys that song?
Yeah.
Did you hear the backstory of what happened? So apparently, like 3 or 4 weeks before that song hit, he was in a real bad place. Like, he was struggling with depression and suicide and lots of substance abuse. He's real honest about it. He did the Joe Rogan podcast, and I listened to it. It's pretty good. He seems like he's a good dude. So he literally dropped down and prayed and was like, God, if you will, just show me a sign that I need to be here, I will devote my life to you and whatever. And then literally within the next couple of weeks, the song hits number 1 on everything, and now he's everywhere. And he's taking it seriously. Like, he tells everybody that's why it was basically divine intervention that God stepped in and was like, look, man, I'm going to use you. So stuff like that can happen. It can use it in all different ways. So I think that's good. I commend you on that part of it.
Well, same thing. When I won this championship, the first thing I said in the middle of the ring, I held the championship, and I said, all glory to God. You know what I mean?
So I guess you're a baby face then.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I
said, look at my face.
So I was heel for 15 years of my career, and when I flipped babyface, so now I'm Mr. Tracy Smothers actually used to call me Dusty Lawler because he said I was the last territory babyface, so he was likening me to Dusty Rhodes and Jerry Lawler.
Yeah.
So I always kind of take that with me too.
Yeah. So I asked Jerry Lawler this: which is your preference, babyface or heel?
Now babyface. Okay. Because, like I said, I do so much with the ministry and I do so much in the community and things like that. It would be almost impossible for me to be heel in Dyersburg. Now, when I go to Arkansas or I go to California or if I go here or go there, maybe, that kind of thing. Yeah. And it was fun while it lasted, but I really do enjoy being babyface now.
Nice.
What did Lawler say?
He said heel.
No, of course he did.
Yeah. Well, he said it was more fun. He said because just like you could do more stuff, as the heel versus being the good guy. So. Interesting.
I like it when he does. I saw your Superman stuff.
Yeah.
I like it when he does the Superman spot, which is basically where the guy pummels him in the corner, right, and beats him down. The guy turns on like, "Yeah, I got him!" Yeah, and then Lawler gets up and does the George Reeves and then drops the strap.
Yeah. So. He brought me. So he was a comic book artist.
Yeah.
And he brought me a thing he did. It's hanging in there on my Superman wall. Of his, what do you call it? Mount Rushmore of Superman. It's got all of them, and he's a really good artist. I was really, I tell you what, I was real impressed with him because he and I'd known of him kind of like you were talking about. We're roughly the same age forever, and always looked up to him. And so I was even nervous when he was going to come in here, and then I thought he would only talk for 10, 15 minutes something because his time's so valuable, just like yours.
Yeah.
Well, man, I had to cut it off. Like he was ready to go forever. Yeah, it was great. I enjoyed talking with him. And I always enjoy the wrestling perspective too because. It's like I said, I don't mean to keep talking about sales, but on the business end, there's so many things, correlations that a business person can get from what people do in professional wrestling.
Yeah.
You got to be a good speaker. You got to be able to sell your whatever your storyline is and sell your position. I mean, there's a lot to it that I think is correlates.
Yeah, and we talk about professional wrestling now, like Kevin Owens, for instance. Like I've never really been a big fan of him because he's very nonchalant about everything. Like the first time he showed up in WWE, he was wrestling John Cena, who was the biggest star in the world at the time. And he basically comes like, "You're not that good, John. I could beat you any night of the week." He's basically underselling everything. You know what I mean? And like, why would I want to watch that match if you're telling me that that? And Cena on the flip side. He made the match. He well, this is why. And he was all excited, and he sold the match to everybody, and that's the only reason people want to see it. You know what I mean? So, like you said, you have to be able to sell whatever it is. If this is title, if it's this candle, if it's this microphone, whatever it is, you got to be able to sell me that this is the best microphone you've ever seen in your life.
Well, and another point too is I think being a professional wrestler, it's similar to what we try to train in martial arts. you got to have some self-confidence to do that. And so, because the number one fear in the world is public speaking. And you're not only speaking in public, but you're in, tights or whatever out there doing it. That takes some confidence.
Yeah.
So
I would think so. I love that bit, too, because like Seinfeld had said, that public speaking is the number one fear, which means that people would rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy.
Yeah, no, that's true. I've actually done it. I did our dad's eulogy, and I normally am not nervous talking because we do trials and stuff. But that was rough, man. That was difficult to do.
Yeah, I did my grandfather's eulogy, and it was rough. He was he had dementia and Parkinson's like that the last 8 years, and I tell you, like the hardest day wasn't the day he died. The hardest day was the day he didn't know who I was. Right? So I go, and my mom had kind of, had kind of stooged me off a little bit. She's like, he didn't know who I was, kind of thing. So I'm like,
how old were you?
This is about 12 years ago. Okay. So early 30s. So like I go, okay. So I go to the nursing home, and sure enough, he didn't know who I was, and it was heartbreaking. And then the last Father's Day he was alive, I was kind of, feeling sorry for myself. Like, I don't want to go. He's not going to know who I am. That kind of thing. I was, I don't want to go. Blah, blah, blah. I made myself go, and I walked in, and my grandmother was there, and she goes, "Bob, look, who's that?" And he looked up, and when I missed him, he goes, "That's Anthony." You know what I mean? And it's like, they gave me that one last moment. You know, that kind of thing. So, it's always. Like we talked about, you don't know what God has in store for you,
Yeah, my granddad went through a dementia bout before he passed, and it was a similar experience and then he did have one brief time of clarity there before he finally passed. Yeah. So, but like we just said, you never know. I mean, you need to be thankful for the people that are around you. We need to fight a lot less and get along a lot more. Maybe watch more wrestling.
at least with wrestling, we know who the good guys and the bad guys are.
Yeah, generally, right? Yeah.
In politics, it's a little harder.
It's a good escape. So, well, I don't want to ask you that question.
You can ask me
I was going to ask you about the little people wrestling.
Midgets?
Yeah. You ever have any little folks in there wrestling?
No, but my buddy actually runs the Micromania tour.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and he goes all across the country with it. I love him to death. And they actually came to Ripley a couple years ago, and I went and got to plug our show in Ripley to those fans and stuff like that. It was really good. Like those guys are really impressive.
Oh yeah, no. So I mean, a lot of, and whether they're little or big, it's a lot of wrestlers are very skilled. But maybe, I was thinking about it because downtown Bruno, there was a stint in Memphis wrestling where he was wrestling women, and then I want to say at one point there were two little people he wrestled or something like that.
There's no time. He's done so much stuff. He calls me every other day just about. Just to shoot the crap and kind of see what's going on.
Well, tell him you met a big fan of his. I was always a big fan of Downtown
I'm sure
Bruno.
We could probably get him on sometime if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to.
He loves telling stories and stuff like that.
Well, I'd like to get more of your guys on. I enjoy talking about wrestling with folks.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
Josh and I are always getting. Really, we do this every Tuesday live, and then we'll even pre-record some if it helps somebody schedule better.
Sure.
And we do it. There's no. Here's why I do this podcast. One, I like running my mouth, obviously. But two, and I like talking to people I haven't met and getting to know about things maybe I didn't know about. I find it interesting. But it's also co-promotion. When I first started doing this, a lot of local lawyers were like, "That's so stupid. Why would you do that? Is it because I'm arrogant or because of whatever?" It's because every time people watch this, people now are watching me that have never seen me because they know you, right? You share it to your stuff, and they see that Kickin' Lawyer logo, right? Well, I practice law in Dyersburg, so it indirectly benefits me. Yeah. So my point is, I don't care who it is. We talk to just about anybody, but especially people that I can relate to with something like wrestling. I mean, I got to get your figure up here. I got Hogan's. I got Lawler's back here. Yeah. And I got my little mini belt over there.
I'll have to send you a picture of my collection sometime. It can rival your Superman.
Is that right? Yeah. Well, so I'm a Superman guy, obviously, but so you got a lot of wrestling stuff?
Oh man, I got tons of wrestling stuff. I've got a program from 1948 that has the original NWA World's Champion on it.
Oh, cool.
You know what I mean? I got a program from the day I was born, June 5th, 1981. That was That's one of my favorite things just because, you know what I mean?
It's personal to you.
Personal to me. Another thing that's personal to me is my grandmother, me and her are the only wrestling fans in our family. She's pretty much the reason that I'm a professional wrestling fan. So when she was a kid, she loved wrestling too, and she actually kept a little black notebook where she wrote down results of what
really?
So I have that black notebook now.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's pretty cool too. She actually comes to most of our shows. Well, definitely our Dyersburg shows, and she's known as the Golden Granny.
I like it.
So everybody, more people.
Yeah.
I think at this point, more people know the
her.
Golden Granny than they know me, which is kind of sad in a way, but that's okay.
Yeah, so my grandparents were big wrestling fans. And my granddad was one of the old school guys. If you told him it was fake, you were getting punched.
Yeah.
You know, it was legit.
Yeah.
And my mother was a big fan. I remember in the 80s, I got jealous sort of for my dad because it used to be up the street here called Rollies. It was a roller skating rink here in Covington. And the Fabulous Ones came. And they came in and they didn't have their shirts on and were over there and people were taking pictures. And my mama and aunt, her sister, were all about them. And I remember as a kid going why do I feel like this? You know, because she liked the Fabulous Ones.
She liked the Fabulous
She
Ones.
got a picture with them and stuff. And anyway, it's funny.
My grandmother, when she was going to shows in the 80s, she met the Fantastics, Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton. And she got an 8x10 of them signed,
Yeah.
Well, I end up working a show with them. That was actually the last show they were ever together before Tommy passed away. Was WrestleMania weekend in Louisiana.
Uh-huh.
We had them in ring, and I brought that with me, and I had them sign it after the show. So it's signed 30 years apart.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite things too. But
Josh and I will go to a lot of comic conventions. We actually host the Covington Comic Con. We're promoters for that every year. And we've had some wrestlers at that, and we've even talked about doing a co-event, maybe having some wrestling during the weekend. But what I was going to say is we'll go into some of the bigger ones, and you'll see. I mean, you see all kinds of wrestlers. Like I saw Sergeant Slaughter at the Nashville Comic Con, and it's just interesting to still see those guys that you've looked up to. Because he had a G.I. Joe figure. I remember when I was
want
little.
that G.I. Joe figure too.
Yeah,
by the way.
I have it somewhere.
Do
I wish
you
I
really?
had brought it. I bought the original Sergeant Slaughter, and I don't
you?
have the accessories, but somewhere I have the figure.
Yeah, that's one of the on my wish list. Is I
Well, if I can find it, I'll just give it to you.
Really?
It'll mean more. I mean, not that it doesn't mean anything to me, but I think it would mean more to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's amazing. We actually hold the. I was telling him I do the Mid-South Mini-Con in Dyersburg.
Okay.
Which is just a very small one, and then my buddy Alvin Minnick does the Dyersburg Comic Con.
Yeah.
So we kind of co-promote those together. So I love the Comic Con stuff. I'm a big pop culture fan, like anyone else is. Movies, music, that kind of thing. Not so much comic books, the actual comic books, but just the movie versions, I guess. That kind of
so
thing.
I'm a big comic book guy.
Yeah.
Still old school comic books. But to each his own, and it's all supporting the same type. Nerd culture. So it's all good.
Right.
I always said I'm a big nerd. It's just I'm a nerd that learned how to fight. So
yeah, we should be able to thank Big Bang Theory for that. It helped kind of smooth the way for a lot of that stuff.
That's right. Now the nerds are cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the nerds are kind of cool. So I mean.
Well, Greg, do me a favor and one more time tell everybody where they could find you at and find information about your promotion and whatnot.
So it's Pro Wrestling Mid-South. We're on all the social media stuff. So Facebook. Instagram, all that kind of stuff. Golden Boy Greg Anthony. I have a page, obviously, but I have a friends page too. If you want to contact me personally about, like you said, sponsorships or maybe something like that. Genesis 3224 Ministries, which is, I don't know if you're familiar, is actually the story of Jacob wrestling God on the mountain. So that's why it's wrestling. That was actually the scripture that kind of drew me into Christianity. So you can find me in any of those places, and God bless and thank you.
Sweet. Well, thanks for being on the show with us.
Absolutely.
We did have Travis Robertson. I think he's a wrestling fan, and he said hi. I'm sorry I didn't see your message there, Travis. And a few other folks I'll let you comment on later. But I do want to thank the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony, for being here with us today. And I want to thank you guys for watching, as always. We'll be live on Tuesdays for another Law Talk. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts or watch them. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, Facebook, you name it. We are on there. If you have not already, please go and download Inside My Head. It's by the local band, N.A. The Band. It is free. We're trying to help those guys get a bigger platform. They're very talented, and again, it's free, so you can't go wrong with it. And then Michelle Allen, although she's not free, she'd be glad to help you. If you're buying, selling, renting, leasing real estate, she's your go-to in the area for any questions involving that subject matter in Tennessee. She'd be glad to help you out. And then the Cellar Restaurant and Prohibition Bar is coming up next. First, I'm talking about Mason's High Octane Martial Arts. Just visit masonsmartialarts.com. Located in Covington since '93, and we'll teach you how to do that cool kick like that. Now I want you to go to the Cellar. You just visit cellartn.com or look us up on Facebook or Instagram. There's lots of cool events going on all the time. Good food, good drinks. Location in Covington and one coming up in Somerville. And then Masonite Digital Marketing, Josh will help you with your brand, your email, your website design, your commercials, drones, etc. Just visit masonitemarketing.com. Who we got next week, Josh?
Next week's that pre-recorded with Marthius Wade.
Oh, so I just lied. I said we were going to be live,
yeah,
but
we'll
we're
be
going to be
live.
pre-recorded.
We'll be back live the week.
Oh, hey, I did go to that comic book store this weekend. I had a big Labor Day sale, and they had his comic book there. So I was excited to see that we had him on, and you guys will get to watch that next Tuesday. All right, so thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Keep kicking. Thanks for watching, guys. Just remember that this is not legal advice or investment advice or business advice. This is for fun and entertainment purposes only.